Okay, so for those of you who have not watched the video just yet on the main channel, which is totally fine because it's only been up for like an hour, there were some leaks over the weekend. Now, these leaks with regard to Assassin's Creed come from Insider Gaming, which is a company and a group that has had sort of like I don't know how I would describe it exactly. I think that their leaks are usually accurate. However, I often disagree with their interpretation of the leaks, or like the filler language that they put in with the leaks. So like for me, that's at least how I usually would break it down, because they had a story where they were saying stuff about the Ubisoft Star Wars game, and they were like taking one little leak piece of information and then they assumed another piece, and then they tied this whole story together that went viral, and it's like, oh my god, this is gonna be amazing, when it was kind of built on a flawed premise. So while I think they have sources that they're reporting that are usually decent, sometimes it's worth taking with a little bit of a grain of salt, because they can kind of stretch these things out a little bit further than they probably should be. What's specifically being outlined is their portfolio of games that they are currently working on. Now, for those of you who are reasonably, I'm not saying you're a bad person for this, I'm kind of jealous. For those of you who have not been like super active in keeping up with Assassin's Creed leaks, basically right now what Ubisoft is doing is they are moving from one like major giga game in the form of
Assassin's Creed Valhalla,
and having that contain every single little piece that could possibly appeal to every niche possible. They're going to try to make smaller, more focused games that are a little more refined, if that makes sense. So what this would mean is, like, instead of having Assassin's Creed Valhalla, which has stealth systems, melee combat, ship sailing, sort of this, like, since launch, they put in this this mode that's like a roguelite mode. They have, you know, the never-ending river raid mode. Instead of putting all of those things as different modes within one big game, they're going to go in and they want to make a bunch of smaller games that are meant to appeal to each one of those little niche groups, because some players will love the river raid mode and don't really like the big open world section. Other people love the open world sections and hate the river raid mode. So you're going to like separate everything out and make games that are built for each of those groups. And the idea, at least hopefully, is that you can have games that specialize, and so each of those smaller subgroups will be more satisfied and hopefully be more likely to spend money on the game at full price and potentially buy cosmetics and play it over and over again, that type of thing. And initially that sounds okay, but we'll get into why I'm a little less enthused about that in a moment. But if we break down what exactly this is, it's more information on which games are also coming down the pike, specifically from smaller studios that you might not have heard of. And this, to me, is where it starts to get a little bit concerning. And the whole time we go through this next little section, I just want you to keep in mind one little thing, okay, as we go through this. It's extremely common that Ubisoft will try to give smaller studios a project, a smaller studio that has previously only done support stuff for other big games, but they've never put out a game by themselves. They've never like built the project and shipped it, right? They always have helped this bigger company or bigger studio work on this thing, and they work on the smaller tech down here and all of this stuff, but they've never done their own titles. And Ubisoft, every time they've tried this recently, it doesn't end well. Famously, Ubisoft Singapore, which developed all of the water tech for Assassin's Creed Origins, they are the ones tasked with Skull and Bones. I think we all know how that's going. They also have smaller studios working, or they had smaller studios working on, for example, the remake of Prince of Persia. And that was such a disaster, they took it away from that smaller team and gave it to a bigger team that has worked on Assassin's Creed stuff to finish the project and ship it, because the smaller team couldn't get it done. Now, to be clear, this isn't me dissing on the individual developers. I think that there are some phenomenally gifted developers within Ubisoft across the board. What I am saying is that clearly the management within those smaller teams is not robust enough to get these projects across the finish line, because every time they've tried, it doesn't end well. So when we see leaks like this, I start to get a little bit worried, because it seems like a doubling down on something that hasn't been working. Specifically, giving whole titles potentially to small teams that don't have an amazing track record of putting out massive games. So, for example, what they outlined was that, for one, they're going to be doing, they're already in talks to work on a sequel to the, as of right now, unannounced Project Nexus, which is a VR title that will probably be revealed around E3. A VR game like in the Assassin's Creed universe. My guess is it's just going to be kind of like a free climbing simulator, I would assume. I don't know what else you would do with an Assassin's Creed VR game, but maybe you guys can think of something cooler. Then, other than that, they're also working Ubisoft Sophia, which is a group known for co-developing Assassin's Creed 3 Liberation and Assassin's Creed Rogue. They've pitched Project Nebula, which would be an Assassin's Creed title with 3 different settings: India, the Aztec Empire, and the Mediterranean. Now, I'm going to be real talk. I have no freaking clue what that means. Having a game set in India, the Aztec Empire, and the Mediterranean, those are like 3 locations just about as far away from each other as you could possibly have. So I don't know how you do this. I don't know what this means to have an Assassin's Creed game that spans these different areas. Does this mean we'll have 3 different protagonists? Does this mean that we're going to have somebody working like in the East India Trading Company or something, and then you're traveling through all these areas? When is this set? We have no freaking idea. And to be honest, this is a smaller team that would be working on this. I don't know what this looks like. I'm a little worried. But you know what? Maybe it'll be awesome. Because again, this is a small team. If this was Ubisoft Montreal or Quebec, one of their big teams, I would still be a little bit like, I don't know what this even would look like. I don't know what this is. Okay. The fact that it's an even smaller team, less renowned team, I get a little worried. Moving on, Ubisoft Chengdu, I'm assuming is how it's pronounced. I have no idea. They've pitched Project Raid, which they plan to be a free-to-play 4-player co-op title that will be PvE. It's believed that the title's characters will all be from the Assassin's Creed universe. I would imagine this is similar to the like multiplayer stuff that they did for Assassin's Creed 3, maybe even Unity. Nothing too crazy, but you know, again, they're trying to come in and they're trying to give every niche its own game. You like 4-player co-op games? Boom! You can have one. Oh, you like games that are, span huge areas like India, the Aztec Empire, Mediterranean? Yeah, you can have your own game. And we'll just make you get a game and you get a game and you get a game and you get a game. It's the Oprah Winfrey way of designing your portfolio of games. And I'm not so sure it works. The third thing that they outline, and this is where we'll discuss real quick the Star Wars thing. The third thing is Ubisoft Annecy, known for developing the multiplayer portion of games like Assassin's Creed and Splinter Cell, as well as co-developing The Division 2 with Massive Entertainment. They've pitched Project Echoes, which has been described as a multiplayer title that will use Ubisoft Scalar technology. Now, this got me intrigued. Why? Why, pray tell? Well, quite simply, because Ubisoft Scalar tech is actually kind of freaking cool. Ubisoft Scalar. We haven't really seen this in action. I think we might have seen it in action in an earlier phase, but let me just show you what this is so you know what they're talking. Because what they're describing is they're saying that they will be working on an Assassin's Creed game with the tech that I'm about to show you, okay? So just try to spin what this possibly could mean. What kind of game would come out of this? This little reveal was from like last year.
Video games have evolved to bring
Last
more
March.
and more players into worlds where they can experience new adventures. Step by step, game makers have taken advantage of incremental improvements in technology to push the boundaries of what is possible, always dreaming of bigger and more interactive game worlds, yet always being limited by the computing power at their disposal. What if we could make this limitation a thing of the past? Games are powered by engines. The bigger and deeper games have become, the more complex the engines. Animation, sound, rendering, physics, gameplay, and many more systems are crammed into the engine in very static ways, making major changes increasingly difficult. Our approach is different. We are setting game makers free from the restrictions of single machine computing, transforming these engine systems into distributed services and allowing them to harness vast amounts of processing power in the cloud. This enables the construction of gigantic game worlds at a scale far greater than anything that has come before. This technology is built to power the game worlds of tomorrow. To bring them to life, it supports massive numbers of game assets, simulations, AI and player entities. And because the dreams of players and game makers are constantly evolving, this technology is made to evolve alongside them, updating constantly and adding more capabilities as they are needed without interrupting play. Imagine a game world, vast, rich, and fully simulated, populated by an unlimited number of players, all sharing and shaping a single reality together. Not long ago, this could only have been a dream. Today, we are building the technology to make this happen. Introducing Ubisoft Scalar.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. What the hell does that mean? And basically, the idea is that they're going to decentralize most of the passive processing requirements for the game engine. So, or they're going to centralize it. So instead of it being run off of your computer entirely, a lot of it will be run off of servers. The benefit of that would be that you could have, as they mentioned, literally unlimited player numbers in a given world. You could have AI that's not run or limited by your computer, but rather that's all run in the cloud. So you could have just unending, like, populations of people. Yeah, what the hell is even that? Yeah. And one of the things that they kind of touch on, which I honestly don't know how this would be implemented, but they describe, like, with current engines, you're not able to just quickly replace pieces because it's very static. If you remove this gear, the whole thing stops working. What their goal is to remove it so each gear is independent and doesn't need to be attached and can be swapped out. So if you wanted to replace the graphics node, you could do that. If you wanted to go in there and just in real time replace a huge section of the map, you wouldn't need to take the servers down for that. All of this stuff would just work. That's the idea. It's unclear how this is used, but they seem relatively excited for it. Now, I mentioned we might not have ever seen this in play, but we might have. This is Beyond Good and Evil 2. We saw this in 2017. I've shown you guys this a couple of times, but this was an early version of the tech that they were working on for this game, which has still never seen the light of day. But the potential here is that you can have, you know, surface to space travel. You can have different planets that are all operating independently of each other while also, you know, influenced by each other's gravitational forces, stuff like that. You could have earthquakes, you could have tsunamis that all take place in the game world, and it can just handle it. It can handle it. And the basic premise of this, and the most bare bones way I can describe it, is that some processing isn't needed frame by frame. Some processing can be done a little bit slower with a little bit more lag, and it won't affect the game. But as of right now, all game engines pretty much keep it all local. So it's all still being managed on your computer, on your console. What Ubisoft is trying to do is they're saying, okay, well, we don't need to calculate like how this planet is moving on your console. We don't need to calculate how, let's see, that like maybe this earthquake or the tsunami would affect the area you're playing on. We don't need to calculate the movements of the planets and the stars and things on your console. That's just needless. Or the AI, is another thing. Because the AI, you just decide like where a character is going to go, what they're going to do, what they might say. You can calculate that stuff in the cloud with different algorithms, and then you can send that back to the console. You don't need to spend processing power on the machine to do it. You can do that elsewhere and just relay the information back. And that's what they're trying to do here. So hopefully that makes sense. You just take the stuff that's not as urgent. You have something else. You have this server do that and then send the decision. It would be like if you have a team of people working on something. You have to work very actively on the urgent thing. And then the stuff that isn't as urgent, you can have somebody else working on it. Like Nikki and I are prepping. We're going to do a big run of stickers. We have a bunch of like stickers with various designs, and they're from like the emotes and stuff from chat. And so we're only going to have 250 of each. And when they're gone, they're gone. I'll be announcing these probably next week once I get them in and I can show them to you. But for this, like for some of it, I want to do handwritten notes to everybody that buys one. And as part of that, I will need to sign all of these notes. But Nikki can help me also loading up the envelopes. I don't need to do all of it myself because just frankly, like that isn't going to matter. The end product will be the same whether I'm packing the envelopes or I'm having help packing the envelopes. So all of this stuff just like, it kind of ties in. And it's about working smarter and not harder, if that makes any amount of sense at all. So with regards to the Star Wars game that Dream and Plays Games brought up, again, thank you for $4.99. What this could be implemented in is that Star Wars game. This same scalar tech where you could have multiple planets for you to explore that have been built out using procedural generation and then populated by hand and then managed, and you could have the like AI, the NPCs, the population, the fauna, everything managed by cloud services and processing elsewhere. That's the idea. Now, the one obvious downside, which I'll touch on because I think we just should bring it up, sort of the elephant in the room. This would mean that these games are giga always online. This is not it's online, but it's just like polling. It's like polling to make sure it's still connected, and it's not that big of a deal. No, these are always online. This game will not function in the slightest if it's taken offline. One day when these servers go down, you're going to be screwed because the game will be unplayable. There will be no way to do it because the entire thing is built on using the cloud, which, for some might not be ideal. For me, it's not ideal either, but it's one of those give and take things. You're sacrificing the longevity of the game in exchange for potentially really cool upside in terms of crazy tech. I don't know if that's worth it. Might not be, but bad for game preservation, certainly. Nobody wants this. Well, that's the thing is right now, I would say it's not really clear what this is in the context of games. Like, what does this look like when actually implemented into a finished product that's going to be sold on store shelves? I don't know. I think we can look at it and we can be like, oh, well, we'll have a universe, like a game universe that can be planets, like a galaxy-sized thing with unlimited player numbers in this realm. That's cool. You could have the persistent item tech like Star Citizen has, which if you don't know what Star Citizen is doing right now, they have a procedural or a persistence system where if you travel to a planet, which bear in mind in Star Citizen, they are planet-sized planets. You go to a planet, you go anywhere on that planet, and you drop a single empty water bottle in the game. You drop it on the ground. And then you get back in your ship and you fly away. You can come back in a year's time, a real world year, and as long as nobody else has taken that or moved that bottle, it will still be there on the ground where you left it. A year later in the game. And, you crash one of your ships. You crash on a planet. That crash will stay there until it's salvaged or moved or something. but it will stay there forever, just like in real life. That type of tech is something that Ubisoft is playing with their Scalar tech. So I want to be clear, this has potential for games, but it's all a question of how it works and how it's implemented, to be more precise. Because it can sound cool, like, cool story, bro, or that's interesting, but how is that fun? How do you take that cool piece of tech and make it fun? That's the question. And I'm not honestly sure. It's like the Assassin's Creed Legion, the Watch Dogs Legion thing. We saw some cool tech with that. The fact that you could literally recruit any single NPC and play with them. That's amazing. There is no way to describe that game without it being technologically very, very impressive. But it's like, how do you take that and make it fun, though? It's not easy. It's not easy. Remember the tech for Crackdown 3? Well, exactly. Like, that was tech that they had working in a lab in their early testing phase in beta. But when they tried to take it to a full-size video game to sell to people, it didn't work. It just didn't. And this might be one of those same things. What I do know is, like, they have this type of thing working in Star Citizen. It's slow moving and it's still buggy, and, you know, performance isn't great in Star Citizen unless you're running a supercomputer. But this type of tech can be implemented eventually, and eventually it will be. I mean, a lot of the tech that we consider normal now, when it was first introduced, was like, oh my God, how do you justify releasing something like that? Like, what? Like with the freaking ray tracing stuff. You remember when ray tracing first dropped a few years ago, and like you turned it on, it didn't look that much better, hardly at all, except for in a couple like very carefully staged shots. And it like cut your frame rate by 80% or something insane. Like, it was so dumb. And now it's like, it's better. It got there, but it took years and years. And even now you still need crazy hardware to run it decently. So all told, like, it's a cool idea in terms of tech, but how you actually turn this into something that's fun for a video game, that's a whole other animal entirely. Okay. So when I see that they are talking about making an Assassin's Creed game using the team that worked on the Division 2 or helped with the Division 2, and they want to make a multiplayer title using this Scalar tech, I don't know what the hell that means. It could be awesome. It could also be totally lackluster. I have no idea. But this is like the broader point of all of this, though, is that Ubisoft is continuing to just throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks. I think that's more the approach that they have here. Initially, I was all excited because I was like, oh, they're gonna like make a specialized game for each niche that they're focused on. That's great. And then we see stuff like this, and it's like, oh, it's not that they're going after each individual niche. It's that they're just taking a fistful of crap, throwing it into the fan. It splatters everywhere, and then they see what chunks stuck to the wall, and then they draw a circle around that and go, see, I meant to make this go here. This was all part of the plan. So it worries me. But who knows? Maybe it'll end up being great. Maybe. But I feel like whenever your description of your game, you describe your upcoming game, and then the conclusion is, maybe. Maybe that'll work. That's less enthusiastic, you know. Very specific analogy, Luke. Hey, you know what? If the shoe fits. He took my thing.